Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Graham Noble, Sarah Cowgill, Jeff Charles, and Tim Donner. And this is a special election edition of the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. On today's episode, Election 2022, The Hangover, we bring you a summary of the midterms in 3 brief parts. Segment 1, The People, will run down the races called, including the winners and losers. In Segment 2, The Power, we'll take a look at the messages and consequences of the election result. And in Segment 3, The Politics, we examine the implications of this election for the big show in 2024. All this and more coming up in this special edition of the Conservative Five. Well, panel, I guess the first thing we can say is, wow, that was a surprising election night. There's still a lot we don't know. But let's begin with what we do know. Tim, can you run down a few of the important races for us and what we know?
Well, let's go to the bottom line first, and that is that the Republicans are still likely to win the House, and they still have a chance to win the Senate. So the gloom and doom that most Republicans are feeling this morning is a little bit quick. Both the GOP and the Democrats thought that this was going to be a blowout. Both sides thought that. But let's remember, these were the first federal elections since the ugliness of 2020. And it's also the first election since the abortion ruling. 27% of voters said that was the top factor in their voting. So we underrated the effect of that. Those issues turned the red wave into effectively a conventional midterm, with the Republicans picking up maybe 15 seats or so. It'll be the 5th straight midterm election where the out party picks up seats in the House. But the bookends are Pennsylvania, where it seems hard to believe that this country would elect a man like John Fetterman to the Senate, but they've done that. And that was largely a result of a terrible gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano.
Are you saying you think it really was the down ballot? I mean, if they had a really strong...
Well, in Pennsylvania, there's no question that Mastriano was a drag on the ticket. And in Ohio, in contrast, Mike DeWine won by 25 points for governor, and he pulled J.D. Vance over the finish line by about 7%. But, it was a fantastic night for Ron DeSantis. It was so good, it anticipated even his own wildest expectations, almost a 20-point win. He's going to have to run for president. But the rest of, shall we say, Trump candidates outside of J.D. Vance did not do well. Trump did not have a very good night. And I think the candidate quality in the Senate, largely the Trump candidates, are going to be the ones that the GOP will focus on in this postmortem. But remember, the important thing is that they're going to win the House, and that will cripple Joe Biden.
Sarah, is the demise of the Republican Party greatly exaggerated this morning? I mean, I heard from people, my text messages were blowing up. People were saying heartbreaking, unbelievable, shocking. You've been at this for a long time. Share.
Well, thank you for pointing out how old I am.
I'm sorry.
Well, honestly, I think that the Republican Party went from the do nothing, go along, get along, and try to look pretty to stomping through Tokyo like Godzilla with Trump. And now somehow they've got to find a middle ground to where the Republicans actually do something, and they don't do it with such venom or, bombacity. So I think that's going to be the message takeaway here. Trump did not do well. His candidates did not do well. Now, DeSantis just shows you it can be done. He took even Hispanics out of the heavy blue areas and coasted to victory. And I agree with Tim here. He's got to go he's got to go run for president. That's going to be his next move.
Jeff, is this your takeaway? It was DeSantis all night, all the time, and now we need to ride that horse in 2024?
I think it's very possible, and this morning I'm seeing a lot of people on social media making that same argument. DeSantis did really well. Now, I will kind of temper his win because his opponent was very weak. Charlie Crist was not a very good candidate at all. I mean,
well, wait, he's lost everything, right? He's lost as a Democrat, lost as an independent, lost as a Republican.
Hey, if they'll elect Fetterman, who is really just a step away from being unable to go to the office. Let's face it, they can elect anybody anywhere.
I wouldn't say anywhere, not in Florida. I mean, Chris is like the only person who has lost more than Beto or Rourke. So, Chris, even after he won the primary, one of his first statements was, if you voted for DeSantis, don't vote for me. Like, it's almost like he wanted to lose. But even that being said, DeSantis getting 60% of the vote, 56% of Latinos. He won Miami-Dade County, which is 70% Latino. Yeah, if people weren't looking at him before, the people who weren't, they're looking at him right now for the presidency. And Trump doesn't seem to be doing himself any favors with some of the things that he's been saying on Truth Social.
Yes, Crist was a weak opponent, but look at Marco Rubio. He had a woman, Val Demings, who was considered a strong opponent, and he won by 16 points.
Right, but maybe that makes the point
in the Senate.
Maybe that makes the point that you were making, just a few minutes ago, which is the strong governor candidate.
Yes.
That's very
helped
key.
to carry. I think they carried each other because Rubio's very popular as well. But effectively, Florida politically is now the equivalent of Alabama. It really is. They don't have a single elected Democrat official in the entire state.
That's really shocking. That's really
utter
shocking.
Domination.
Let me just say too that I thought their election results were very timely, very efficient, very well done, kind of a model for the rest of the country.
Yes.
But Graham, I want to go to you for a second here. My takeaway was that when I looked at the evening in aggregate, it seemed to me that people were not voting the issues; they were voting ideology. And the reason I came to that is because they voted in Fetterman. Fetterman, you only put him in office for one reason. He's going to vote the way you want him to vote.
Yeah, I think so. I really think that in that race in Pennsylvania, if Fetterman had not been able to continue his campaign for that seat, I believe the Democrats could have replaced him with a duck-billed platypus. And Democrats in Pennsylvania would have voted for that creature over.
Can you be more specific?
Well, yeah, exactly. The thing is, you're absolutely right, what you just said, Lisa, and that is that we've got to the point now where I think probably it's true of both sides, but I would say definitely the Democrats more so, is that it would appear Democratic voters, or the majority of them, do not really care about what mental or physical condition their candidate is in, or what they're campaigning to do, or what their track record is. They've got that D after their name, and that is now the only thing that matters.
Tim, were you shocked, that it wasn't the economy, stupid? Were you kind of surprised that people didn't really? Everyone was saying the issues. And this morning, I've looked at a lot of left-leaning newspapers, and they're all saying, well, the abortion issue really did have kind of legs. But I don't know. Was that it?
Well, it's interesting. The polls, who've been heavily criticized at these polling agencies, they mostly had the results pretty much on target. But this time, they were wrong in their surveys about key issues. They started to say that abortion wasn't really that big an issue. It was over the summer, but not into the fall. I was surprised myself, but 27% of voters saying that was their biggest factor. That was an issue. And so was, honestly, the 2020 election. And I think the discussion of that by several of the Trump-backed candidates made voters in the middle uncomfortable enough that they probably lost a state or two, maybe three, where a more conventional candidate that was less sort of threatening to independence, the Republicans would probably have the majority in the Senate right now.
Yeah. Now, Jeff, do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that the Democrats' gambit strategy of funding candidates on the right who would be seen more as extreme seems to have paid off in at least a few races. I mean, you had the Pennsylvania governor's race. A lot of people thought that Mastriano was way too out there for people to stomach, even if they didn't really like the Democrat. I mean, we saw that with Bolduc as well, I believe, in New Hampshire. So I think what we're seeing is that people may not like the Democrats, but they also don't necessarily want the MAGA going on. So I think that's and I think that's also why DeSantis is getting such a bump, because he's showing that as somebody who may have modeled some of his style on Trump, he didn't necessarily make his brand about Trump and about MAGA. He just did what he did and won people over.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and come back with segment 2, the power. How will the midterms affect the balance of power for the next 2 years? Stay with us.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and others.
I can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Getting noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.
Welcome back to this special election 2022 edition of the Conservative Five. Jeff, what was the voters' message last night? And did you find yourself a little surprised by some of the results?
Yes, I do. And I think the message was, I mean, they definitely didn't want Democrats holding on to the House. At least that's what it appears right now. But it also was a repudiation of certain types of candidates. I mean, a lot of people have been saying that Republicans would have done a lot better if they had run better candidates for the Senate. I mean, you had Herschel Walker, who has his issue. He has his baggage. He's not very articulate. And with Dr. Oz, he is more articulate, but he kind of came out of nowhere, and you saw how the base reacted when Trump decided to endorse him. And I'm seeing a consensus that if they had selected more run-of-the-mill candidates, maybe more America First, but not too crazy, then those Senate seats wouldn't even be in question. So I think that's what we're seeing here on the right. And I do think that this is going to set up how the Republican Party is going to proceed in the future. Is it going to go full MAGA, or is it going to go back to the establishment? I'm thinking it's going to go somewhere in the middle of there. And again, I keep bringing up DeSantis, but I think he is evidence of that. So it'll be interesting to see how all this shakes out going forward. But one thing I'm going to say, I've been warning people, when the midterms are over, do not expect any kind of reprieve. We may get a little bit from the midterms, but now we're going to see the real battle coming up, especially if Republicans take back the House.
All right. Now, Graham, it's interesting because the Democrats threw a lot of money at these so-called Trump candidates, and, they were betting that they were going to go down. You think their strategy, is it obvious that it worked?
I think in light of the results that we got from last night, it is hard to dispute that strategy may have worked in certain areas. I think another factor here, quite possibly, is that really Democrats kind of won the messaging battle. I have a feeling that a lot of Democrat voters, blue state, dwellers who always vote Democrat anyway, I believe they, rather than being kind of discouraged or being angry at the Biden administration for what's gone on in the country, the problems, I believe they actually just bought the Democrats' messaging, which is crime. What do you mean crime? Crime isn't really on the rise. That's just a conspiracy. It's just kind of fake news from the Republicans. And inflation, that's not really the fault of Congress. It's not really the fault of the Biden administration. Inflation is a global problem right now. Everyone's having it. So we can't blame the Biden administration for that. So I think basically the Democrats, with their endless deflections and pointing the finger elsewhere, have actually managed to win the messaging battle. And I think that was a large part of why so many incumbent Democrats did, if only by the skin of their teeth, manage to hold on to their seats last night.
Okay, but Republicans were really making fun of all the messaging about democracy dying, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
What does this tell us? What, in other words, are you saying, and Tim and Sarah, please chime in on this, are you saying that their messaging was right and the Republicans' messaging maybe was off?
It's not right. The messaging is not anywhere near right. But they like to instill fear. Fear works in this country. It worked with COVID. It works. So if we can say democracy is going away, and you see that repeated everywhere, all across social media, all across, CNN and MSNBC, and anybody who says anything, they're on the soundbite. Democracy is going to die. It's a threat. It's a threat. It's a threat.
Every voter group that I saw interviewed before the election on various outlets, when the idea of democracy was brought up, they all dismissed that as like a defining issue of the campaign. So it's very perplexing that in an environment where Joe Biden is weak and addled, where he's had a record that even Democrats are pretty much trying to run away from, where there's, raging inflation, a recession that may already be here, crime rates that continue to rise, making urban America dangerous, a border that's completely dissolved. And yet, despite all of that, the Republicans could not really break through beyond the minimum. So there's going to have to be a lot of soul searching, but I'll tell you that the big battle now, I think, is going to be between Trump and DeSantis, because Trump seems intent on running. I think he's been devalued after this election, and DeSantis is on the rise. To say he's on the rise is a drastic understatement. However, Trump will probably brutalize DeSantis in a head-to-head primary, and that's going to probably weaken him looking ahead to 2024. So that could get ugly, because Trump is never one to back down. And DeSantis right now will not be able to avoid the calls for him to run for president.
Okay, Jeff, I know you're on social media a lot, and I see you shaking your head. To what extent did the left-wing media really, what part did they play in people not buying the fact that, well, it's not that they're not buying inflation, it's that they're believing that the whole world is having an inflation problem and the whole world is having a energy problem, even though we were energy independent just like 2 years ago. I mean, how much of a factor it was the left-wing media, and until recently, the control of every social media outlet?
Yeah, the activist media did play a huge role. Censorship on various social media platforms played a huge role. But I think we can't ignore the fact that what I think played the biggest role is that Republicans make the mistake that they always make in every election cycle on almost every issue. They're very good at pointing out what Democrats do wrong. They're very good at pointing out the holes in their arguments. Why this policy won't work, why that policy won't work. Democrats bring a solution, Republicans shoot it down, but they don't bring their own solutions. It's not that they don't have them, but they are horrible at selling them.
At messaging.
Yes,
exactly.
This commitment to America thing didn't really work at all.
It
because
didn't.
There weren't any specifics, and you didn't hear anybody talking about it. In 1994, when Newt Gingrich brought forward the contract with America, everybody on the Republican side was running on that contract. It was specific, it was targeted, and the GOP won an overwhelming victory. Kevin McCarthy tried to sell this commitment to America. The fact that it didn't really go over at all has to bring into question what his ability will be as the new Speaker of the House with a small majority.
All right. So what you're saying is, Jeff, I guess, and Graham, please chime in here, is that the medium was not the message. The message was not the message. There was no message. In other words, the messaging was all messed up as far as the Republicans were, not the Democrats. And I think a lot of conservatives thought it was the other way around going into last night.
Yeah, the message was blue donkey bad, and that's it. The Contract for America came out, and you're right, Tim. We talked about this, and then it just kind of petered out. Nobody really brought it up again. So yeah, you can tear down the Democrats, but Republicans will have to come with their solutions to the problems. Because just because you tear down what the Democrats are doing doesn't mean the problem goes away. You still have to solve that problem, right? That's what the Republicans always fail at when it comes to messaging.
And because DeSantis has solved so many problems in Florida, he's the problem solver. He's the guy that's got the actual solutions.
Well, he's got a lot of mojo. We can say that for sure.
No question.
Sarah?
The commitment to America was simply a PR stunt gone wrong. I mean, it was horrible. And we in the media have watched as things work. Things don't work. In 1994, like Tim said, it worked beautifully, and people got on board. But it's like they threw it to the wall to see what was going to stick, and the Republicans didn't pick up on it. Nobody was talking about it in the coffee shops or the bars or on social media. Nobody knew about it. So as we observe what works and what doesn't work, I still will go back to the fear. I'm going to take away your rights. I'm going to march on the Capitol, insurrection, election deniers, all of those things worked just like a well-run clock. And the Republican messaging did not work. And I think we can all agree on that. I don't care what side of the aisle you are media-wise. That is just an observation. It's fact. It just worked.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. And when we return, we're going to discuss what you wanted to discuss this whole show. And that's why we're leaving it for last. The politics and what this tells us about the big show in 2024.
Becoming a strong defender of freedom and liberty doesn't just happen. It's taught.
Liberty Nation Gen Z is your portal for news that's hot, engaging articles without the spin, riveting videos that foster critical thinking, downloadable worksheets and quizzes for each age level,
combating propaganda, defending freedom. This is Liberty Nation Gen Z, because the future starts today.
Liberty Nation Gen Z. A free-thinking future starts here.
And we're back for our third and final segment of this special election 2022 edition of the Conservative Five. Graham, let's face it, the midterms are in many ways just the setup for the big show. Already there have been rumblings from former President Donald Trump about a third try for the Oval Office. Does this election make his decision tougher or easier?
Well, certainly these results, kind of a twilight zone thing that we've been through in the last 12 hours or so, changes a few things about 2024. Of course, there's the big question, Trump or DeSantis 2024. I'm going to say that Trump actually does his bull in the china shop routine, doubles down on claims about elections, and he runs, and I am going to say that he still wins the Republican nomination, although he has been damaged, and his path to the nomination, while it was just a couple of days ago pretty assured, now not so much. Does DeSantis run at all or not? I think that DeSantis doesn't run if Trump runs. I still think that. And here's the thing, though. Here's a positive, I believe, for the Republicans. And that is that, a midterm election, obviously, it's very much a referendum on the policies of the party in power. And everybody thought, wow, the Democrats have pushed their radical progressive agenda so far that there's going to be a big swing the other way. They're going to take a beating. But now that hasn't turned out to be the case, the Democrats, in their usual tone-deaf manner, are going to think, well, maybe people were okay after all with all our with pushing things the way we pushed them. So maybe we'll just continue down that path instead of kind of reining back. Maybe we'll just go all out on 2024, and they may even go even further now, which is going to give the Republicans it's going to set up some very good prospects for the Republicans come 2024 if the Democrats now just continue running to the left rather than taking a beating and saying, whoa, we need to ease off. We need to come back and be a little more moderate and reasonable. So I think that's one positive that the political right, particularly the Republican Party, can take away from last night.
Tim, we had a difference of opinion on this, and you said something this morning that really hit me. And amazing that married people can actually have a difference of opinion. It does happen every now and then.
Rarely, but
I've been saying this is Trump's time. He's got one more, in him, and let's ride that horse. And you said to me this morning, you said, this is DeSantis's time. This is DeSantis's moment. And watching his speech last night,
very presidential.
You made me onto something.
Yes, it was a very presidential level speech. It was designed to be that way. DeSantis is young. He can wait. He's only 43, 44 years old. So he can wait for 2028. The problem is when you miss the moment in politics, you miss the moment. Chris Christie, as an example, in 2012 was his moment to be the Republican nominee for president. He didn't run. Mitt Romney got the nomination. And by the time we got to 2016, Donald Trump was all the talk and Christie was old news. Right. So DeSantis needs to pounce on his moment because it's hard to imagine that Republicans writ large don't see him as their best prospect for regaining the White House. But there's something else here. The result from this midterm, I think it's fair to say, makes it quite a bit more likely that Joe Biden will run again. He believes he's the only one that can beat Trump, and he can prove it. He already beat him once. His argument will be.
I'm sorry. I got to disagree with you again. I mean, he's so old and.
Yeah, but it didn't make any difference yesterday, did it? When it's supposed to be a referendum, these midterms, supposed to be a referendum on the president. Well, he can honestly say that this was no repudiation of him, and there's no one else. And
I think you're going too far. Let me just say, I think you're going too far. This was, and I'm going to go quote you. This was a typical midterm election. It was not a red wave,
right?
But there were still a lot of pickups, right, Jeff?
Yes, there were. I mean, I still stand where I stood before. I do not think Biden's going to run again because he's old now. He'll be even older, and he still has 2 more years to show how incompetent he is.
Exactly.
And he will run. And I guarantee you, he will rise to that occasion. If there's anything we can count on him to do is to show us how inept he is. But even going back to Trump and DeSantis, I mean, we have these midterm elections. They don't make Trump look very good. He's saying some things that aren't making himself look good right now. Like he gloated about a Republican losing to a Democrat. It was like the first comment he made on Truth Social when the results started pouring in. And I'm seeing the chatter. People are like, maybe it's time to move on. Mind you, the investigation into Trump, the FBI, you remember the whole raid at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah.
They were waiting and they couldn't make any moves because it was election season and they had to avoid the appearance of partisanship. Now that's gone. So all that stuff is going to come rolling out. And whether Trump did something wrong or not, we know what the left is going to do with that. So I do think that it is time for DeSantis to run because he is at his most popular. And the thing is, even if he doesn't win the nomination, he can still run again. He's still a young guy. So I would be surprised if he didn't end up throwing his hat in the ring, even though he's kind of indicated that he won't. And honestly, I think a lot of it, he may even be hesitant, but I think people are going to call for him to run. And these aren't going to be establishment people. These are going to be people who like Trump, but are ready for somebody who's a little bit smoother, somebody who's younger.
Sarah, is this what you're hearing in the heartland?
Yeah, he's going to be devastated.
Let's give Sarah a chance here.
They run against each other.
Sarah.
Mostly what I hear is that we like Trump's policies. We don't like Trump's personality. And they are looking to go in a different direction there. And I think that even the Democrats who have voted for Joe Biden because they couldn't stand Trump are done with Joe Biden, but they don't want Trump back. And all of that has to do with the election 2020 and the amount of drama and trauma it costs this country, money, everything is just stop talking about it. Stop talking about it. It's time to move on. Both sides of the aisle, time to move on, except for a few people that don't want to move on. They want to wallow in the MAGA style of Republican politics, but that's few and far between, at least from what I've seen.
Tim, I'm sorry I cut you off. Do you have one final comment there?
I was going to say that one of the takeaways from last night is the change, and Ron DeSantis referred to this in his victory speech, that he has changed the electoral map. Florida and Ohio, that's been overlooked somewhat, but a 25-point victory for the governor, a solid victory for J.D. Vance. Florida and Ohio are now bright red. And those 47 electoral votes added to the 40 from Texas give the Republicans going to 2024 87 electoral votes in those big three states, which comes close to matching the big three on the left, New York, California, Illinois, which is 101. So the electoral map has changed, and that was cemented in this election.
Graham.
Well, I would say that DeSantis has one or two major challenges, I believe. And, look, I'm playing devil's advocate here in terms of how conservatives would view what I'm about to say. But I think DeSantis, for a start, we don't know that his popularity in Florida translates to the national stage. And I think the other thing is that, I have no doubt whatsoever that Trump is still going to run in 2024. And if DeSantis does again, as I think Tim said earlier on, Trump is going to maul him. I mean, it's going to be, it's not going to be good for either of those two candidates. And I believe Trump would still come out on top, but both would be deeply damaged. Does DeSantis want to subject himself to that? And also, here's one more thing. And I know you may find this really difficult to believe. However, I believe that if DeSantis were to get the Republican nomination, what the Democrats and the media and their allies, what all of them did to Trump is going to pale by comparison to what they do to DeSantis.
Actually, I completely and totally agree with you. I've been saying this. Everybody's been saying, a lot of people have been saying, Ron DeSantis. But in essence, I kept saying, wait till you see what they do to him. You think, all guns
it's all a matter of
all
how
guns have been on Trump. Now they're going to turn those Gatling guns on DeSantis.
DeSantis is a street fighter. He knows how to take a punch, and he certainly knows how to give one. I wouldn't worry about his ability to win a street fight.
All right.
Not maybe against Trump, but against any Democrat. But I think that's becoming more and more clear.
Okay, but Graham's point is well taken, which is the Republican Party going to be served well from a inside brawl between DeSantis and
Certainly not.
Yeah, that's not going to be
Never.
fun.
Never. It
I
will
mean,
never serve well.
even when Trump made that sanctimonious comment, like I could even see it in the base and in social media. People did not like that, but they expected it at some point. But it's not going to be good. It's going to tear some things apart. I mean, I don't think it'll be fatal, but it's going to cause some issues.
I think it'll be fatal to one of them.
Well.
All I know for sure is that somewhere there is a door frame with Kevin McCarthy's fingernails still embedded in it, where he tried to prevent them from dragging him onto that stage at his little party last night.
Well, I was going to give some final thoughts, but to be honest with you guys, I think you covered the waterfront. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your joining me today for this special edition of The Conservative 5. And thanks to our viewers for watching.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.
That's it for this special election edition of The Conservative 5. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to surf on over to libertynation.com. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank Diorio, and our executive producer, Sarah Calgill. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief. Thanks for joining us today. This has been a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.